Hey everyone, thanks for watching. A couple things before I get started. I'm recording this in my parents' house, at my parents' house. So if you guys hear any weird noises, that's probably just my family moving around because our walls are kind of thin. So yeah, if you hear any extra weird noises, that might be it, or it could be somebody outside because I'm right near a window. So if that could be why you hear extra sounds, I'll try to remove them. But if I don't, that's why. This is the third time I'm recording this, so hopefully this time it goes well. But yeah, thanks for joining and we'll get started. All right, so I'm sure most of us know who William Shakespeare is, but I'll give a quick rundown of his life, or not his life, but his career. So he's an English playwright, and he penned around 38 plays over the course of his career, which spanned about 25 years, starting anywhere between 1580 and 1590 and ending somewhere between 1613 and 1614, according to the Royal Shakespeare Company. So as you guys can see in the title of my video, inside the video, the official name is for my class, but as for the secondary title, I'm going to be discussing why I believe there is a right and a wrong way to interpret Shakespeare, using The Taming of the Shrew as my example. And I'll be using textual evidence provided by Shakespeare's writings and based on some of my own thoughts and opinions that I've developed over the course of my studying Shakespeare. So basically that's it, and I'll get started. So The Taming of the Shrew is considered one of Shakespeare's earliest plays according to the Royal Shakespeare Company, and it lands somewhere between the 1580 to the 1590 range. And as for the plot, I imagine most of you watching this already know the plot, but for those of us who don't, or you just want a refresher, I'll give you a really quick rundown. So we have two sisters, Kate and Bianca. Kate is the eldest and Bianca is the younger. Bianca is not really important to the video overall, but she is important to some of the aspects as to why what happens to Kate happens to Kate. So they are the two daughters of a man by the name of Baptista. They live in northern Italy in the region of Padua. Kate, being the eldest, has to be married before her younger sister can marry, or as per their father's request. So Bianca is very much desired by the young and old men of the city. However, Kate is the shrew. She's the main character, and being a shrew, she has denied she does not want to get married. She refuses to get married at all. So two of Bianca's suitors, Hortensio and Gremio, devise a plan to basically marry Kate off to somebody so that Bianca will be free for them. If you think that's a lot of people, well, let me tell you, we've got more people in the story. So we have Lucentio and Tranio. Lucentio is the young son of a lord. I'm not sure where he's from, and Tranio is his manservant. At the beginning of the play, the two of them happen upon this argument going on between Baptista, the sisters, and the suitors, and Lucentio, of course, instantly falls madly in love with Bianca because she's sweet and dainty and fair, and he's love-struck puppy, and you know how romance stories go. So he and Tranio devise a plan for them to switch places. So Tranio will pretend to be Lucentio, and Lucentio will take on another identity as a tutor so that he can sneak into the Manola household as a way to get closer to Bianca by tutoring her. The two suitors are also planning to do this, and I'm not really sure what they thought was going to happen, but they're all love-struck puppies, so what can I say? So then on top of that, we have another person in the story being Petruchio of Verona. Now, Petruchio is also a lord, as far as I remember, but his estate is kind of down on its luck. He's in need of money. So he's come to Padua in search of a wife so he can marry her and gain her dowry. He happens to be old friends with Hortensio and Gremio. So upon meeting these two old friends, Hortensio and Gremio basically convince Petruchio into a little scheme of theirs to tame and marry Kate, which would leave Bianca open for them. Of course, Petruchio agrees because A, money, and B, a challenge. And then from there we have the story. Basically, Kate doesn't want to marry Petruchio, but Petruchio tries to tame her, and we have a lot of romantic shenanigans that happen. So I feel like a lot of you at this point are probably asking yourselves, but why? Why am I using taming as my example, and what does this even have to do with misinterpreting Shakespeare? Well, it is time, but it's been about 2.5 years now, I think, since I started studying Shakespeare for my minor. Granted, I'm nowhere near as smart and clever as half of my classmates, but I like to think that I at least have gained some form of knowledge from my teaching. And I've actually come across a lot of people not throughout my life, but recently, that have a dislike, a hatred, or an indifference towards the play. I think many of it considered to be anti-feminist in its portrayal of Kate and Petruchio's relationship, because, they view Petruchio as, of course, an abuser, someone who made his wife stay up all night, didn't let her sleep, didn't let her eat, and basically hitting her, things like that. And Kate is viewed as the victim of her time, her gender, victim of her father's, whims to marrying her off because he doesn't want her, and to her husband. Well, these mindsets, I want you guys to throw them away. Like, I want you to get up and throw them out the window. And if you're not near a window, pause the video, go throw your opinion away, and then come back. Great. So I want to present to you a different sort of viewpoint on the two characters. Basically, they're both terrible people. And I know that may sound kind of weird or wrong, but I promise it's going to make sense. And this may come as a shock, but a lot of the reasons why I think this actually comes down to how Shakespeare wrote. So, as many of you not necessarily know, but I feel like anybody who has seen a play or has had anything to do with theater would have at some point in their life seen a script. Like, you know what a script looks like, you know kind of how it's structured, but in case you don't, it looks something like this. So here's a traditional script that I found in Google Images. Basically, it kind of shows you how a scene is going to run in a show. So the second paragraph here begins by telling us that Sarah appears flummoxed, but that she's enjoying herself. The second line states that her friend Tasha performs the action of pulling out a dress and holding up to Sarah, and that Ellie smiles, something like that. This is called a stage direction. It tells you exactly what a character is doing at a given time, possibly how they feel, what they're thinking, and generally a director is actually going to follow these stage directions as a way to basically not interpret, but it's going to tell them how the scene should look and what the author desires for the scene, like how they desire it to run. And as you can also see, there are more stage directions as you look at the page. Like, they clearly outline everything that you need to know for when you perform this play. Well, Shakespeare was a little bit different. So what's different about this? There's no stage directions. There is a line at the top that denotes the arrival of the witches, and that is technically a stage direction, yes, but it's actually not written by Shakespeare. He didn't write them. These were added by whichever editor released the version that you have read. But notice that the rest of the page shows nothing to denote a movement or an action taken by any of the three witches. You could argue here that it's possible that they're standing around talking. However, any director you talk to is probably going to tell you that's static and that's boring, and they're not going to have them just stand around. They're going to block something, which blocking is a term for movement around the stage. I'm not going to get into acting lingo, but that's a basic idea of what it is. So Shakespeare's original scripts did not provide any stage directions or any insight into a character's inner thoughts on a matter. So any stage directions that you may see are provided by whichever publisher or editor made the copy you own. Also, side note, while this is mostly a joke to people, the only quote-unquote real stage direction that Shakespeare ever wrote is the infamous exit pursued by a bear line from Winter's Tale, which isn't incredibly important overall to the story, but I think it's really funny. So based on what we've seen, we can actually clearly see that there are going to be obvious differences between a traditional script and a Shakespearean script. One is very structured, and it basically gives you everything that you need to know about your characters, what they're going to do, and then the other is less so, and it allows for creative choices and some creative license. Though with creative license, you do also come across misinterpretations, and remember that because I'm going to come back to it later. So all of that being said, Shakespeare did have one way of informing his actors of when he wanted something specific from them. We call this embedded stage directions. In his video, aptly titled Shakespeare Embedded Stage Directions, Roving Knave defines it as, quote, hints given throughout Shakespeare's plays that let you know what you could be doing at any given moment, end quote. I'm going to link his video down below so that you guys can go check it out. So, generally speaking, embedded stage directions are lines in the play that suggest a certain action is taken by a character through dialogue used. For example, in Midsummer, Act 3, Scene 2, Hermia and Helena are having a fight over the men in their lives, and are arguing about who is the shortest, and basically it's Hermia. She's really, really tiny. And Hermia says to Helena, quote, "I am not yet so low but that my nails can reach unto thine eyes," end quote. What's happening here? Hermia is going to try and claw out Helena's eyes. This line is an embedded stage direction in the language to allow the actress and the director to know that the next step to be taken is Hermia attempts to claw out Helena's eyes. Another example is from Act 2, Scene 2 of The Tempest. Here, Caliban, Stephano, and Trinculo meet for the first time, and Caliban, believing Stephano to be some sort of deity, says, quote, "I'll kiss thy foot, I'll swear myself thy subject," end quote. To which Stephano replies with, quote, "Come on then, down and swear," end quote. We can presume from the text and from the language that this is an embedded stage direction for Caliban to get down and kiss Stephano's boot. It seems obvious, but some people may not see it as obvious, is what I'm trying to say. So how does any of this apply to Taming and how people interpret the show? Well, since we've determined that Shakespeare did not write stage directions, we can discern that at any given production we see of Taming, much of the movement we see and the direction will have been added in by the director of the production and not by Shakespeare himself. And when interpreting Taming through a modern lens, people have a tendency to mistake things or maybe not see the embedded stage directions that Shakespeare provided. So, with these ideas of embedded stage directions in mind, let's take a look at Taming and Kate and Petruchio as characters. Act 2, Scene 1 of the play opens with Bianca and Kate embroiled in basically some sort of argument that began off stage that we haven't had a chance to see. Like, they come out on stage already, like, in this argument. And when they first come out, Bianca has a line that says, directed at Kate, quote, "Unbind my hands or I'll pull them off myself," end quote. According to Bianca, Kate has apparently bound her sister's hands together and has refused to remove them up to now. So that line is basically telling you, like, there's no stage direction, obviously, other than to tell you they enter the room, but there's a line there that says, "Unbind my hands." So clearly we can understand, oh, they come out, Bianca's hands must be tied, like Kate must have tied her sister's hands. And then a handful of lines later, their father Baptista walks in and sees the whole commotion. He turns to Bianca and says, quote, "Bianca, stand aside, poor girl, she weeps," end quote. This is another direction for Bianca to be crying at this moment, and looking at the copy of the play that I own, it's actually in response to an added stage direction by the editor that says, quote, "She," meaning Kate, "strikes her." So that might not necessarily, that's not that it's not obvious, but if you look at it, you don't have the stage direction for Kate to hit Bianca, but the reaction Bianca has is to cry. So in the language, if Baptiste is telling her to stop crying, the editor probably looked at that and said, oh, okay, so Kate did something to Bianca to cause her to cry. And then if you look farther down the scene, which we're about to get to, but if you look farther down the scene, Kate hits Petruchio. So the editor probably saw that and said, oh, okay, so if she hit Petruchio, Bianca's probably crying because Kate probably hit her earlier on in that scene. Thus, he added the stage direction that says Kate strikes her. And again, as I just mentioned, if we look further into the scene, during Kate and Petruchio's fateful meeting, we get another instance of this embedded stage direction. So during their argument, or their back and forth, Petruchio is trying to talk to Kate, and then he proclaims himself to be a gentleman. Kate retorts with, quote, "That I'll try," end quote, and Petruchio's response is, quote, "I swear I'll cuff you if you strike me again," end quote. Quick side note here, I actually missed this the first time I saw and read the play, but when Kate says to him, "That I'll try," in response to Petruchio's declaration of being a gentleman, Kate's trying to provoke Petruchio. Like, she's not just saying that, she's trying to provoke him. When she threatens to hit him, it's because she wants him to hit her. Like, she wants to anger him so that he'll hit her, thus proving his lack of gentlemanness, because she's Kate. So Kate has hit Petruchio outright. Again, there's no stage direction to indicate that this was something that should happen, but Shakespeare wrote it into the language and in the way Petruchio reacts. And as I said before, her reason for hitting him is in the text, in this case, her desire to try and have him act ungentlemanly towards her. And I want to clarify this before moving on. He never actually does hit her in this scene. They actually return to their battle of wits until Baptista comes in and interrupts them. So why is this scene important? To me, this scene is the definitive scene that shows that Kate is not just a victim in her story. I don't want to blame or judge a victim. I'm not going to do that because that's not my place. But what I want to point out is Kate is not the innocent in this story, and she never was. And yes, I will say in some capacity, she is a victim of her time period and her situation, but I don't think that tying up her sister in anger, striking her to make her weep, and striking Petruchio just to get a reaction out of him is okay. Kate's an awful person here. She's verbally and physically abusive to her family and to a complete stranger. And it's almost like she doesn't even care. Like, she doesn't have any care for how her actions affect the lives of those around her. This is wrong. This is not how anyone should live their life. Again, Kate is a victim of her circumstance, yes, but she can change it. She has opportunities to change it. She's given opportunities to change it prior to her meeting Petruchio, but she doesn't. Like, her sister hardly has done anything to provoke her, yet she just decides to hit her because she can. It's almost like she just wants to spite her family. So for now, let's actually shelf Kate because I want to take a quick look at Petruchio. So as I said before, Petruchio is the son of, well, I think he's the son of a lord, or he is a lord. And he's running out of money. His estate is running out of money, so he goes to Verona in search of a fortune. And of course, there, like I said, he meets Hortensio and Gremio, who tell him about Kate and are like, oh, if you tame her, you can marry her and get her dowry. And of course, Petruchio wants her money. He wants a challenge because he's Petruchio. I think he's an interesting case, though. I don't really see him as the cruel abuser that a lot of my peers seem to view him as, and I'm not going to deny this, but making a bet to marry and tame a woman you don't know for money is wrong. Like, I'm not going to say that's a good thing, because it's not. But I think he learns from the experience. Petruchio is by no means an angel compared to how I've painted Kate. I know I made it sound like she was an awful person, and I'm making it almost sound like he's not. But remember, I said they're both pretty awful, but in different ways. Petruchio is a blowhard, he's impulsive, he came drunk to his own wedding just because he knew it would annoy his new wife and embarrass her whole family, because he can do that. That's just how he acts. He doesn't love Kate. He likes the idea of a challenge and he wants her dowry. He doesn't care about her at this moment. He is no more husband material than Kate is wife material. And of course, as for the infamous taming aspect of the story, the interesting thing about that is when I mentioned embedded stage directions, it actually goes both ways. Having embedded stage directions indicates something should happen, but a lack of embedded stage directions can actually mean the same thing. People always say that Petruchio abuses Kate by forcing her to fast and not allowing her to sleep, and this is true, yes, she's eaten little and hasn't slept. However, neither has Petruchio. During his monologue about his plans, he says, quote, "And if she chance to nod, I'll rail and brawl and with the clamor keep her still awake," end quote. This is Act 4, Scene 2 of the play. So the question I have is, who's keeping her awake if not Petruchio? When she doesn't sleep, he doesn't sleep, and when she doesn't eat, he doesn't eat. What I'm trying to say is, if Petruchio was truly cruel, there's a scene in the play where a servant brings out meat, and Petruchio looks at it and says, "This meat's no good, it's burnt, take it away, I'm not going to eat it, she's not going to eat it," because this is his way of having her fast. But the issue is, there's nothing wrong with the meat, like, it's perfectly fine. He's just saying that because he doesn't want her to eat the food. Now, my point with that is, if he was actually abusing her and, I guess, basically gaslighting her, he would take the meat, like, he would eat the meat in front of her because he wouldn't care. He would just eat it himself because he knows there's nothing wrong with it, but he's trying to convince her that there's something wrong with it because he's trying to tame her. But he doesn't do that. He takes the meat, the perfectly good meat, and says to his servant, "Take it away, we're not going to eat this, she's not going to eat this, I'm not going to eat this." So my point with that is, it's not necessarily him abusing her. I see it as a sort of solidarity between them. I think he wants to show Kate that acting that way, like the way that she has been acting this whole time in the play, is going to get her nowhere in life. I also think he does it as a way to sort of not bring them closer together, but it's a way to find common ground with his new wife. However, this is not often the characterization of Petruchio that we get. Instead, you'll most likely see a version of him where he doesn't exactly follow this, and people would rather depict him as a cruel person. It seems almost like people want to villainize him. I've seen this more often than not, that the heroes of the Shakespearean plays, especially lately, people just enjoy villainizing them. I don't know why this is. I'm not going to blame it on feminism because I'm not going to touch that branch, but I often see these viewpoints come from women, and I'm not sure how I feel about that. That's a whole other thing. But what I'm trying to say is, instead of using these directions that Shakespeare gave us, people just look at it at like face value and say, okay, he's an abuser, time to villainize him, boom, he's a bad guy. And a lot of that actually can also come down to an issue with creative license. So I mentioned creative license earlier in this video, and a good example for those of us who are on the internet, or at least those of us who are in the theater, I'm going to give you an example of creative license from theater. Illegal Heathers. Now, if you don't know what Illegal Heathers is, be glad of that. Please don't look it up. It's terrible. It's going to give you an aneurysm. But basically, what happened with this show is this high school performed it, and they took the play of Heathers and they basically changed it so much that it was almost not even the same play. They removed characters, they removed songs, they changed, like, I think they might have added a few things. It's been a while since I've had the misfortune of seeing it, but basically, creative license is when you take an existing property, such as in this case, Heathers, and then you remove things, you add things. It's basically you're taking too much liberty, or not taking too much, but you're taking liberties with the item that you have. So basically, and this happens in Taming, where versions will have Petruchio as an abusive, cruel man who hits his wife. That's more of a license. Creative choice, however, is when you take the hints, and in Shakespeare's case, embedded stage directions, to understand how to do the play or characterize someone. An example of creative choice would be Kate hitting Petruchio because the embedded stage direction is there, or a character trait based on the information given. So basically, a creative choice is, okay, you look at what you have, like what Shakespeare's given to you, and you say, okay, what can I do with this? Like, what choices can I make? You aren't really changing. You're not changing the character or the play, like you're not changing the intent, but you're saying, okay, I have these sort of options, what can I do with them? That's kind of what creative choice is. Another example of license that I want to give is a version of Midsummer that the Royal Shakespeare Company did a few years back, where they changed Helena to a Helenus. The reason I take issue with this is because that clearly was not the author's intent. It's creative license because you are changing an aspect of the story that already existed. So it's changing it completely, because originally Shakespeare intended for Helena to be a woman. Yes, she was played by a man, but that's besides the point. That's a whole other can of worms. It also didn't work because they actually didn't change all of the pronouns in certain scenes, and there's actually a really important scene in the play where Helena accuses Hermia of, quote, offending their sex, meaning their gender. So the point is, if she's accusing Hermia of offending her gender, but one's a man and one's a woman, it doesn't really work, is what I'm trying to say. And I'm not going to get too into that because I don't want to offend anybody. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to make a point in saying this is license. This is just an example of license. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying that they should have changed some of the pronouns if they wanted to do it. They should have cut out certain lines. That would have still been licensed, but it would have at least made more sense. So this, in a way, of course, applies to Taming, where the director perpetuates this abuser aspect that they see in Petruchio and make him actually abusive towards Kate. That is creative license. And the other point I'm trying to make is that just because you have the ability to use creative license doesn't always mean you should, or mean that what you're going to do is going to actually make sense in the long run. The issue with looking at Shakespeare through the modern lens is that you run across these issues of modern topics that sort of integrate themselves into the back of your head when you read. Again, that's not always a bad thing. I'm not saying it's always a bad thing, because it can actually lead to a lot of interesting ideas, and it can help connect this 200-plus-year-old story to modern thoughts and opinions. It can help people connect in different ways. But when those changes happen at the cost of a character's personality or a plot point or just the author's writing and intent, that's where I take issue. That's where we begin to see, okay, this isn't really the same story, or it is, but it's not what Shakespeare wanted for us to understand. It's not the story or the message he wanted to show us. I'm actually going to start wrapping this up because we're at 9 pages out of 10, and this is already way longer than any of the academic papers I've ever written. And if I had to write a thesis paper, it would probably be on this topic, because I love Shakespeare. I could talk about it all day. Just ask any of my friends at school. Sorry, I needed some water. I'm starting to whew. But I don't want to bore you guys with any of my rambling, so let's get down to the point. So we've looked at embedded stage directions and how they can provide us with insight into characters. We've seen how creative choice and creative license can have an effect on the story. We've seen how creative license, while not an inherently bad thing, can actually in a way, negatively impact your story or the message that Shakespeare was trying to bring to us. And at the beginning of my video, I asked you all to throw out your opinions on Kate and Petruchio, and I wanted you to think of them as terrible people. I was serious about that. However, I was being a little overdramatic. I don't actually think they're terrible people. I think they're flawed people. I see them as two very flawed, broken people who go on this journey of realizing that if they want happiness, they can't continue to behave in the way that they've been behaving. It's, in a way, a story of self-discovery. Like, Petruchio changes Kate, yes, but she chooses to change because she wants to be happy. And I feel that Petruchio has a very similar sort of story. Like, his attempt at changing Kate ends up changing him in the process, and he ends up finding out that she's not as awful as he thought. She's not a shrew. She's just a broken, hurt person, and I feel that Kate sees the same thing in him. And I think it shows us that yes, we're flawed beings, and that despite those flaws, we can actually still find happiness. And sometimes you need to compromise. And in the case of Kate and Petruchio's marriage, there are times when she's quote-unquote tamed, or she's not actually tamed. She's compromising with her husband because she knows that sometimes it's better to give a little than to needlessly fight over silly things. Most people you talk to who are married are going to say, yeah, sometimes you just need to give in to your spouse a little bit. Like, it's worse in a marriage to make a big deal out of small things because it's just going to drive a wedge between you. It's okay to compromise with people. It's okay to sometimes give in to your spouse and say, you know what? It's okay. I'm going to let you have this one because this isn't the point of our marriage. I don't want to hurt our marriage. And like I said, I really do have a lot more to say. And maybe in the future, if you guys like this video, I'll make a sequel or I'll touch farther into certain things you guys want me to. But for now, I'm going to stop it here. And I hope you guys learned something today. I hope you enjoyed this video. I enjoyed making it, even though it took me like 3 times to record this. And I hope you enjoyed the artwork that you got to see. This is a design that I did for Kate based on my troupe's production of Taming. They actually did this show the year before I joined, but I had a chance to see it, and my Kate's design is based on the outfit and the hair that they had for their Kate. And so I hope you guys liked the art. I hope you guys liked the video, and I will see you all next time.